Hare Krishna. Welcome to this 6th day of Bhagavad Gita course. Yesterday we were discussing about the material nature, Prakriti, and we saw there are two worlds, material world and spiritual world, and also how Prakriti is eternal and material world is temporary. Okay, so then we are discussing on law of karma. Why do bad things happen to good people? And we were discussing in this that how in the world there are lot of variations. Some people are very rich, some are very poor, some are beautiful, some are not, and so many things we discussed. And ultimately we discussed that how this is all due to law of karma. And so we were discussing about what is law of karma. Law of karma is like we have the third law of Newton, that every action there is equal and opposite reaction. So similarly for law of karma, we saw that it also says the same thing: as you sow, so shall you reap. And then we were saying that there are different kinds of karma: karma, vikarma, and akarma. So karma means good activities like helping others, opening orphanage, hospitals, etc. And by doing good activities, what result you get? That you get some heavenly situations in this life or in the next life. And then we were discussing about vikarma, that vikarma means bad activities or activities that are prohibited in the scriptures. Good activities are those activities which are told to be done in scriptures, which are promoted in scriptures, but there are certain activities which are prohibited in the scriptures for human beings to do, and they are called vikarma. So in general sense, bad activities. And we discuss like meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit relationships. These are all considered as bad activities, vikarma, or they are all prohibited in the Shastras. And then the results, what we get by doing such activities is the hellish condition. What we mean by hellish condition is, number one, yes, after death you may go to hell and suffer. There are various kinds of hells mentioned in the Shastras and what kind of punishment is given. But another meaning of hellish condition is that even in this life, even before dying, you may suffer reaction of your karma, of your action, what you are doing. So it is not necessary that if you do vikarma, if you do bad activities, so only after death you will go to hell and then only you will suffer. No. You can get reaction even in this lifetime for the bad activities or for vikarma, and that can make your life as hell, and that is called hellish situations. Like for example, suppose there is one person who is doing business, and in business he is cheating people. He is not doing business by fair means. He is cheating people. Like for example, say there is a builder. So he builds a flat and sells it to two people. It's like cheating, right? And also all other sorts of cheating if it's being done. So what happens is that maybe, yes, after death it is definite for him to go to some hellish condition. But even in this life, he may suffer with some disease, or his children may suffer with some disease. That is also a possibility. It's not necessary that he will suffer because he is staying in the family and the family is taking the karma because he is earning the money and that money is running the family. So then there is possibility that his children may suffer with some disease, his children may die. To give him, when the child dies, then the pain will be for the father. So he will understand that all sorts of cheating what he was doing, all sorts of wrong activities what he was doing, thinking that he is enjoying. This is what happens in the world. People think we are enjoying. Why are you saying we shouldn't eat non-veg? You don't want, you don't eat it. But why are you telling us? Why are you telling us not to drink? Why are you telling us not to have illicit relationship? We are in modern world. We are in advanced world. And we are supposed to do all this. Humans are meant for enjoying. One time a boy asked me that if you say that one should not take liquor, then why did God make it? Well, he made it. It is natural. We should take it. So if he didn't want us to take, why will he make it? And I told him that God made, it's not that he made liquor and gave it to you, first of all. So it is that God gave you grapes and then you made wine out of it. Or God gave you what in Goa you call it like feni. So he gave you nice cashews and you made feni out of it. And then you say, why did God give me? And at the same time, if you believe in God, if you say God gave it, so we are supposed to use it, then you should believe what God is saying in the scripture. So you are believing half the part. You believe that God has given you, so since God has given, I am supposed to use. But God has given you instruction also how to use this life, how to live this life. Why are you not listening to that? So, very clearly we feel that life is meant for enjoyment. Let's enjoy. Who has seen what is going to happen later? Eat, drink and be merry. Who bothers? After death, who's going to see? I have not experienced hell. Nobody has seen hell. Then why we should worry for something which is going to happen after death? Why not worry now? We have something now. Let's enjoy, drink, eat, whatever you want to do. Why think about future life which no one has seen? Yes, you may not have seen, but when you will see and when you will suffer, then you will question. Like when people are born disabled or they are born with some chronic diseases, right? And when they ask such question, why me? Why is it happening to us? Why some people are very rich? Why I am not rich? Why some people are very beautiful? Why I am not beautiful? Why some people are very wealthy, very healthy and strength they have, and why I don't have it? Why some people are not having any disease and I am suffering from my childhood this disease? Why people have good brain, good intelligence, and I am trying my best but I am not able to understand anything? When you ask all these questions, then you should understand that this is coming from your previous karma. When you thought that let's enjoy, nothing is going to happen. And people say, like when they see some nice person suffering, like suppose there is a very nice family and suddenly they have a child who's like disabled or who has some mental illness and throughout life is going to be like that. So the child suffers definitely, but the family also suffers. And that time people ask, such a nice person, such a nice family, they did not do anything, any wrong thing to anyone, they did not cheat. They were very good people. What happened to them? Why God did this to them? They could have done to someone else. There is a smuggler. There is a person who cheats. But he is not having. See these people, very nice people. I explain this by saying that suppose you go to a movie theater and you reach late. Almost half the movie is over. So you reach to the theater, you see the movie, and what scene you're seeing? You're watching that a very nice person, he's sitting with his children, father sitting with his children, he's giving them some gifts, he's giving them chocolates, children are very happy, seems a very nice family. And suddenly what happens? Police comes and he arrests that person and takes him away. And now the question comes, why? This person was so nice, he was playing with his kids, isn't it? He was giving them gifts, he wasn't killing anyone, he wasn't cheating anyone. But please understand that you have started seeing the movie after half is over. You didn't see the first half. Maybe he was a smuggler. He's enjoying with his children, but he was a smuggler. Maybe he was a murderer. So many things, right? And that is why police has arrested. But for us, such a nice person, why did he do? Similarly, when we are looking at one life of a person, we are seeing half the movie. We do not know what has happened in the past life. We are not seeing that. And that is why we say, such a nice man, why did this happen to him? It should not have happened. So karma is very important. Why I'm taking this again topic is that don't think that if we continue to live the way we are living, nothing is going to happen. I have my destiny and it is fixed, isn't it? Why should I bother? भगवान की इच्छा के बिना पत्ता भी नहीं हिलता. Everything is fixed, they say, in life. So then why should I worry? We are going to address this very important topic very soon, just after a few slides, that what does it mean? So be very careful. An intelligent person should be very careful in performing the activities. That is why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, कर्मणो हि अपि बोधव्यम बोधव्यम च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोधव्यम गहना कर्मणो गतिः. That one should know what is karma, what is vikarma, what is akarma. One should know this. Why we should know? So that we can act properly. So my humble request to all of you, after knowing this, don't take your life very cheaply. Take life seriously. Understand the importance of this life, human life. Human life is meant for serious business. Human life is not meant to just eat, drink and be merry, just enjoy, just waste your life like animals. They don't have any purpose of life. We have a purpose. We are different from them. Let's take this life seriously. You may be at any stage of life. Don't think that life can be taken seriously only after 60 years of age. Don't think life can be taken seriously once I have enough money. Don't think that life can be taken seriously once I have completed all my duties. Life has to be taken seriously now itself, because we do not know how much time we have in this life. How many of us know, can guarantee 50 साल तक तो प्रभु जी भगवान भी कुछ नहीं कर सकते? Who can guarantee? Then why take chances? Do it now. Change it now. Become serious now. And that is why these karma, vikarma, and then akarma. So akarma means neutral activities. Activities which are performed for the pleasure of Krishna, like chanting his holy name, like serving him, like offering him bhoga, like preaching his glories, like reading Bhagavad Gita. These are all service to Krishna. So serve Krishna It is called neutral or akarma. Why? It doesn't have any reaction. Good or bad activities will have reaction. You'll get good reaction, you'll get bad reaction. So you may say, what is the problem in getting good reaction? The problem is that you may have to take birth again to enjoy the results of good reaction. And bad reaction, you may have to take birth again to suffer the reaction. So whether you take birth to suffer the reaction or you take birth to enjoy the results, you may have to take birth again. That itself is a punishment. We saw that. We have to change bodies again and again. That itself is a punishment. So that is why be serious now and understand that akarma. And please understand, akarma doesn't mean give up all your duties. This is a misconception people have about akarma, about spiritual life. That means we'll have to give up everything, become sannyasi, go to Himalayas, no family, no business. No. Akarma means, that is why it is a karma. Karma means activity. Activity is there, you don't have to give up activity. Only you have to change your mood. If you are in family life, be in family life. There is no need to leave family. Yes, if you have left family or if you have the opportunity, you can leave family and serve God, do it. If you don't, no problem. If you are in family, stay in family. You are in business, continue your business. You are in job, continue your job. Student, continue studies. But only do this all keeping Lord Krishna in center. That is important for us. So when you do this, keep Lord Krishna in center. That means all our activities are bound. All our activities should be done for pleasing Krishna. Now, how we can do that? For that, we need spiritual guidance. How, as a student, we can perform a karma. How, as a housewife, we can perform a karma. How, as a businessman, we can perform a karma. So, for that, spiritual guidance is required. But we should take this seriously. So, this is called a karma. Now, when we talk of karma, what is the duration of each karma? Right? When the results is there, duration. Duration means when do we get it? Do we get it instantly or is it delayed? Now, some karmas, the result of some karma, karmic activities or karmas, you get instantly. As I was mentioning, that don't think the reaction will come only after you die. You will see hell only after you die. It can come instantly also, or it may be delayed. Like for example, when you go to the bank, so you want money. So there is a way, it's called ATM. You just go, press the button, you get the money, instant. But other ways, you put your check in the bank and then after 2 days, the bank, it will be realized and then you go and withdraw, right? It takes some time. So this is called delayed karma. Or another example we can see is like there are some seeds which you sow. So some seeds like mustard seed, you can see immediately the plants coming up. But if you sow the seed for coconut tree, it takes years to come up, isn't it? So similarly, karma is like a seed. It depends. It's not always you get instantly, or it's not always you'll be delayed. It depends. Like this seed, different seeds fructify at different times. Similarly, karma is like seed, which gives the results at different times. Sometimes instantly, sometimes delayed. Let me give you an example. It's a nice example. Delayed karma, you are seeing here. Suppose somebody is murdered, right? Then what happens? Murder is there, then police inquiry, and after maybe a year, the person is caught, and then there is a court case of 3 years, or 4 years, or 5 years, and then, so after maybe 7, 8 years of committing murder, this person is punished. This is called delayed, right? He didn't get instant, it was delayed. Or sometimes it may be 20 years, right? The case goes on. So it is called delayed karma. He gets the result, but he'll get it late. And then there is instant. Suppose you are going in a train or somewhere, and there is a girl, and somehow you are not able to control your senses, and you say something, and then she slaps you. This is instant karma, right? You'll get it instantly. So instant karma can be anything. I was watching a video, somebody was showing that one person was going and he was carrying his laptop. So as he crossed, the one person came running and he took his laptop. He stole his laptop and ran. And as he ran, there was a car coming from the other side. So he hit the car and he died. This instant karma. Just stole the thing and he got it something. So similarly, we should understand that karmas are either instant or delayed. Let me give you an example from Mahabharata of delayed karma. Do you know this personality here? Is Dhritarashtra. So Dhritarashtra, he was very attached to being a king, and he was blind by birth, and he had 100 sons. So in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, all his 100 sons died. They died completely. And all the sons of Pandu Maharaj, his brother, 5 sons, they were alive. So after the battle, Dhritarashtra went to Lord Krishna. See, Dhritarashtra was told many times that you see, Krishna is the supreme God. Please believe him, serve him. But he didn't see. So after the battle, he went to him and he said, seems you are supreme personality of Godhead. You know everything. I have a question for you. Krishna said, yes, please tell me. He said, why is it that all my 100 sons died and all the sons of Pandu are alive? Not even one. Maybe he was saying, at least ek to mara hota to dil ko shanti milti. Something like that. Even one. He said, not even one died. Why is it? Why all 100 sons died? So then Lord Krishna said, 50 lifetime ago. See how the karma is carried. I'm giving example of delayed karma. Please hear carefully the entire story and then you will understand. He said, 50 lifetime ago, you were a hunter, Krishna said. Now, how does Krishna know this? How does he know? He has supreme power. He is God, and he mentions this in Bhagavad Gita. I told you, when Arjuna asked the question that you are saying that this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, you gave it to Vivaswan, who was millions of years ago. How is it possible? You've just taken birth now. You are almost my age. And then you are saying that you gave this knowledge to Vivaswan. At that time Krishna says, Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjuna. My dear Arjuna, I, you and all these kings, they have taken birth many, many times. But I remember all the birth, you don't remember. That is the difference. Krishna, being Paramatma, if you remember in the description of Prakriti, we also described how Lord is in the heart. Kshirodakshai Vishnu, he resides in heart as Paramatma. So Paramatma means he is observing all the activities of us. Or rather I should say that he is the biggest CCTV camera right here in the heart. Before even you do anything, it is recorded. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Krishna has installed various cameras for recording our action. Like one of them is the earth. If you do anything, you will do on earth, right? So it is recorded through earth. Now somebody can say, no, I will do it in sky. Sky is another camera. Say, I'll do inside water. Water is another camera. Basically what is explained is that everything wherever you do, they are considered as witnesses. Sakshi. But you are doing it on earth. Earth is Sakshi for that. She can go and tell Krishna, yes, I saw this person did this. So you cannot escape. In normal court, you can escape, right? Kisne dekha? And if there is a witness, shoot him or pay him some money and he'll say, kuch pata nahi kya hua. But here is earth, here is sky, here is water, here is fire, here is sun, here is moon. They're watching you. And the biggest camera is Paramatma. Right here in the heart. He is watching you. So next time you're committing any sinful activities alone in a dark room where no one is seeing you, thinking that I'm doing something, please understand, many cameras are watching you. The sun, the moon, the night, the earth, the sky, and ultimately Paramatma. You cannot escape the eyes of Paramatma. So Krishna knew, and Krishna said 50 lifetime ago, you were a hunter. And while hunting, you killed 100 male birds of a family. Seeing that, the father became blind. He started crying and became blind. And that is why in this lifetime you are born blind and all your 100 sons died. This is a reaction of that act. So Dhritarashtra asked, why did it take 50 lifetimes? Right? It could have been that same life or next life, or maximum 2 more lives. Why 50 lifetime? So Krishna said, to have one son, you need to do some good activities. To have 100 sons, definitely you need to do a lot of good activities. So all this 50 lifetime, you were accumulating the results of good activities, and results when they were enough to give you 100 sons, you had 100 sons. But then they all died because that reaction had to be over. So see how complicated it is. It is not very simple. You killed 100 and 100, your sons will go. But then to get that 150 lifetime, he had to serve. He had to work hard. And then all 100 sons died. So this is called delayed karma. So sometimes when we ask, why does the reaction, why it doesn't come in the same life? Let me give you some reasons why the karmic reaction doesn't come in the same life. The first one, death interrupts. Right? Because what life you have right now, you're already carrying the karma from previous lifetime. Already you're carrying. And now whatever you're doing, it's adding up to that. And before even you get the reaction, you die. So death interrupts. And that is why you have to take. And as I was explaining you, different seeds take different time. So similarly, karma is like different seeds. So it is going to take time. Different karmas will fructify different times. So that is why sometimes you get karma instantly and sometimes it is delayed. The third reason is the conditions have to be right. For Dhritarashtra to give the reaction even in next life, the conditions were not right. He was not fit to get 100 sons. So the conditions have to be right. That is the third reason. And understand that body is only a dress. Now let me ask you something. There was a person who committed murder. When he was killing that person, he was wearing red dress or red shirt. And then after 1 month, he was caught. But when he was caught, he was wearing white shirt. Now he comes in front of the judge. And judge says that it is proved that you have committed murder. And now I'm going to give you punishment. And he said, sorry sir, you cannot give me punishment. Why are you giving me punishment now? And judge says, why? He says, because when I killed that person, I was wearing a red shirt. But when you caught me, when the police caught me, I was wearing white shirt. So you cannot punish me. Now, is it a good argument? Will the judge says, oh, very good. Sorry, go back. Case is dismissed. Will he say like that? What will be the answer of judge? The judge will say, whether you wear red shirt or white shirt, you are the same person. It doesn't matter which shirt you're wearing. Now Krishna in Bhagavad Gita explains, Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya narani. He says, Vasansi means the clothes. When our clothes become old, what we do? We just throw them away and take new clothes. Vasansi jirnani. Jirnani means old. Yatha vihaya. Navani grahanati naroparani. Then we take new clothes. But he says, similarly, when the soul feels that this body is old, it leaves and takes up a new body. So, body is only like clothes. It's just a dress for the soul. Person is same. So, as when you commit murder in red dress or red shirt, and then you are caught in white shirt, you cannot give the argument. Similarly, whether you were in this body or earlier body, you cannot say that why am I punished now? Because you are the same person. And at the same time, if you have forgotten that whether you have committed an offense or you are not committed an offense, it doesn't mean that you will be excused. Suppose you go in front of the judge and he says, I don't remember whether I killed or no, so please don't punish me. I said, whether you remember or you don't remember. There are people, like I said, there are witnesses who are remembering. So we cannot give this argument. These are some of the reasons why the reaction comes in next life. And sometimes, this is very important for us to understand, we feel that okay, there is good karma which gives good results, there is bad karma which gives bad results. Suppose I have committed some wrong things, bad karma, and I do some good activities. Will that nullify each other? Suppose I am a big smuggler and then I go and give some donation. Okay, here is a donation to orphanage. Okay, here is a donation to hospital. You are the one who are bringing people to hospital, and then you go and give donation to the hospital. So, is this okay? Can we nullify? Why? It should be. I have done something wrong. I am doing something good also. 7 minus 4. Minus it. It happens or no? Why? It should. Isn't it? Okay, tell me, in this country, we have law. Suppose I kill someone and I accept, yes, I have killed that man. It's okay. I tell judge, see, I have killed him. It's okay. I'll go and give 5 lakh rupees to him. Don't worry. Let him take whatever money you want. But I should not be punished. Will the judge accept it? Judge says, okay, fine. Anyway, they are getting 5 lakh rupees. Good. I release you. Will he be released? But isn't it a good proposal? He will say, see, he was a poor man whom I killed. Family doesn't have anything. I'm giving 5 lakhs. Let it be. So the judge should say, very nice. You are released. Give them 5 lakh rupees. No. If you have killed, you will be punished. Isn't it? And if you are doing something good, you will get result of that also. Same is with the law of karma. If you do bad activities, if you do sinful activities, you will be punished for that. And if you are doing good activities, you will get reward of it. But both will be different. They won't nullify each other. So you will have to suffer for your bad karma and you will enjoy the good result of your good karma. But you don't nullify each other. You'll have to do that. Please understand this. So 7 minus 4 is separate. 7 and 4 you will have to suffer. You will enjoy 7 good reaction and suffer for 4 bad reaction. So the law of karma works on whom? Now important thing, does it work only on me, individual, or does it work on family? Collectively, maybe on the family, on the nation. So the law of karma works on everyone. Sometimes, yes, it is working on individual, but it also affects your family. As I was saying, that if you are cheating people, there is a story that Narad Muni, he meets Valmiki before he became a rishi. He was a hunter, Ratnakar. So Narad Muni says, why are you doing all this? Why are you killing people? Why are you stealing money? He said, for my family. He said, your family? Go and ask them. Are they going to share your sinful reaction? You will go to hell. Are they ready to go? So he goes and he asks them, are you ready to come? They said, why should we come? It's your problem, how you earn money, right? Don't tell us. And then he gets a shock of his life. What is this? I was doing everything for my family and they are not sharing it. So then he goes back to Narad Muni and Narad Muni instructs him, and then he goes on to become a great sage called Valmiki who wrote Ramayana. So we see that whatever is done in whatever means the person utilized to earn money, as per law of karma, if the family is maintained by that money, the family shares the karma. It is not that only the person who is doing, he will get. Like for example, I'll give you how the karma is shared. I was talking to one person one time on non-veg, that why you should not eat. So finally he said, I am not eating. I only cook. I don't eat. So you see what happens. I'll just tell you how it is shared. It is said that the person who brings up the animal in like meat eating, how many kinds of people get the reaction? Please listen. It is not that somebody who's just eating gets the reaction. The number one, the person who brought up the animal to be sold, he is the first one to get the reaction, because he is bringing up the animal and selling it for slaughtering. So first one he gets. Second one, the person who buys from him and takes it and gives it to the butcher, he is the second one who gets the reaction. The third one is the person who actually kills the animal. He gets the reaction. The fourth one, the person who buys the meat, he gets the reaction. The fifth one who cooks, he gets the reaction. And obviously the sixth one who eats. So just imagine, we cannot say, I don't eat, but only I'm just cooking. So, or sometimes people run hotels where non-veg is served and they said, I'm pure vegetarian. I don't do anything. But every day you are committing sin because you are also part of it. You may not eat, but you are part of it. Similarly, the family has to bear the reaction of the sinful acts of the person. So now we will talk about, so we spoke about delayed and instant karma. We spoke about individual and collective karma. Now we are going to speak about prarabdha and sanchit karma. Prarabdha means, sanchit karma means all your karmic reactions which are collected. Suppose in a bank, suppose for millions of lifetime whatever we are doing, all good and bad reactions are stored in a bank. That is called sanchit, collected. Everything you have earned, that is your earning, right? For lifetimes, every lifetime, what do you earn? That is called sanchit karma. And out of that, whatever you get for this lifetime is called prarabdha. Prarabdha means this lifetime what you are getting. For example, suppose a person throughout his life he keeps saving money. And then when he retires, he knows that in his bank account there is, say, 20 lakh rupees. And every month he is getting 10,000 rupees. You see? Now, does it make sense? He has in his account 20 lakh rupees and every month he is getting 10,000 rupees. So, 20 lakh rupees is called sanchit karma, which is collected from lot of lifetimes. And prarabdha is the 10,000 rupees which is getting monthly. But here there is one difference. The example I gave, the person has kept money, now he is only withdrawing. But in our account, it is not like that. It's accumulated, and whatever we are doing, again it's going more. So our balance goes on increasing, and we get a fixed amount for every month, every lifetime. And that is called fate or destiny. Many times we ask this question, what is destiny? What is fate? Nothing but prarabdha karma. Out of your sanchit karma, collected all the karmas, accumulated karmas, what you are getting for this lifetime is your destiny, fate, bhagya, likha ke laye hai. So that is called destiny. Now the question comes, very important thing to understand. If everything is fixed in our life, as we say, destiny, fate, what about our free will? Do we have free will or we don't have? If we don't have free will, we are just like robots, programmed robots, right? Because everything is fixed. It was written that you will come to this course. It was written that you will attend for 6 days, 7 days. And it was written that even after that you will not follow. Right? Destiny, fate. So where is our free will? And if there is no free will, what kind of human beings we are? What kind of living entities we are? Has Krishna taken away all our independence? Has he taken away all our willpower, free will, and he has made into just programmed robots? No. If that was the case, he would have made all of us nice robots, right? Why will he make bad robots, evil robots, thieves robots, murderer robots, cheater robots? He'll make all good. So where is our free will lies? Please understand this very, very important thing. Do we have free will or everything is fixed in our life? What do you say? भाग्य लिखा कर लाए हैं सब लोग माथे पे. Everything is fixed in life or no? Oh, very good. Do we have free will? How? What is our free will? Yes. True. Okay. And I also told you that fate or destiny is the part of your sanchit karma. That means you are getting this fate as the reactions, you are taking some fixed reaction. So it is fixed that it is going to come, isn't it? Then how can you say there is free will? Everything is not fixed in our life. I told you prarabdha means the karmas which were collected, out of which you take something. And which you are taking, that is already fixed karma. Then everything is fixed. Where is the free will? Of course it is there, you are correct, but I am just trying to understand from all of you. Where is the free will? Huh? Sorry? Huh? Yes, but now where is our free will? Do we have or we don't have? That is the question. Yes. Didn't have. Okay. Uh-huh. Right. Of previous karma, yes. Okay. Okay, very nice. So, very nice. So, now let us try to understand where does our free will lie? Whether we have or we don't have. And then when we say Bhagwan ki ichha ke bina patta nahi hilta, what does that mean? If we have free will, then what is the meaning of Bhagwan ki ichha ke bina patta nahi? Is that a wrong statement? I understood your point. Now the thing is, in this way, in this whole situation, where is Krishna? Where is God? Because it is said, without him nothing can move. So if without him nothing can move, that means we don't have any free will. Everything is controlled by him. We are just like puppets. You saw that day, that picture? Puppets. Okay. Now let us try to understand. We get in this lifetime something called prarabdha or fate. So as was being explained, that due to our previous karma, actions, situations arise in front of us. How you react to the situation is your free will. And then when we say, Bhagwan ki ichha ke bina patta nahi hilta, what does that mean? When you desire to act, it is sanctioned by Krishna. So you can will, you can desire, you have free will, but it also has to be sanctioned by Krishna. For example, you desire to take a Mercedes car. I want a Mercedes or Rolls and Royces. But then Krishna sees that as per your karma, only you're supposed to get a bicycle. Right? So then he'll sanction only bicycle. So your desire for Mercedes will turn into bicycle, and maybe you will write on your bicycle Mercedes Benz or something. Or maybe you'll put that, that logo of Mercedes Benz on your bicycle. That's all. So now please understand, we have free will. How to utilize that free will, that is very important. That is explained by scriptures. That is explained by Krishna. If there was no free will for any living entity, there was no reason to give Bhagavad Gita. Why will Krishna speak Bhagavad Gita? Everything is fixed. Even he speaks, people are not going to change. And what is the point? And what is the point of conducting this course? Anyway, you are not going to change. Everything is fixed. So everything is not fixed in our life. First thing, please understand. Clear this doubt, clear this misconception from your mind that everything is fixed in our life. Everything is not fixed in our life. Situations will arise due to our previous karmic reactions. How we react to that situation is our free will. That Krishna has given, that he has not taken away. Krishna has given. So free will lies in how we respond. It is never destroyed. And what is the reason that free will is not destroyed? Suppose. Why? Can you think of any reason? Why free will is not destroyed? Krishna could have destroyed it. Forget it. You don't have any free will. As we said, we are in a prison house. In a prison house, where is the free will for the prisoners? But still in this material world, free will is never destroyed. Why? What is the reason? Can you think of anything? Sorry? To keep the account open, okay. So that means you should never go back home, be here only. Basically to find a way back, okay. Very nice. Yes. Yes. That's true. But I'm saying why free will is not taken away. It should be taken away from us. Or why is it never destroyed? It's because of the free will we are doing all sorts of nonsense activities, right? The evil and the bad is not created by God, it's our own creation. Because of our karma, we are getting this kind of thing, desire to commit sinful activities. That desire comes out of the previous sinful karma. So, and the question that why free will is never destroyed, it's a very simple answer. Because Krishna loves us. and He wants us to love Him. And love can come only when there is free will, when there is independence given. Forcing someone for loving you is not real love, isn't it? If somebody comes and keeps a gun on your head and say, tell me you love me, right? You'll say, I love you, I love your father, I love your grandfather, whomever, right? Please remove this gun. Well, is that love? But if you're given independence, if you're given freedom, that okay, if you love me, you on your own you come to me. Otherwise you're free to go. And if then that person comes to you, that is love. Isn't it? So love demands independence. Love demands free will. And that is why Krishna maintains that free will, because He wants us to love Him on our own, not by force. He can do that. Sometimes somebody asks me, why Krishna cannot make everyone nice person in this world? Or why Krishna cannot liberate everyone at a time? I said, He can do it. For Him, it doesn't matter. He can do it. So why is He not doing it? Because He wants us to love Him on our own. He doesn't want to force that, okay, just love me, that's all. And that is the reason there are 33 crore demigods. As per our desire. Krishna says it's your choice. You want to love Him, you want to love Him, you want to love 33 crores, it's your choice. But when you will understand, after millions of birth, Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha, that after many, many births, when you will understand that Krishna is supreme and on your own, with that love, you will come to me, then I will accept you. So that is why free will is never destroyed. So free will is there. How we respond, I'll explain you with this example. Choice exists before performing karma, not after. Like suppose somebody climbs up a very tall building, 100-storied building, and he goes up there and he jumps from there. I want to commit suicide, and he jumps. And after he's jumping, then he starts shouting, please save me, save me. I made a mistake. Actually, I didn't want to jump, but somehow it came, and what to do? So what? He had a choice before he jumped, right? But once he jumped, then there is no choice. Either sar phutega ya marega, kuch to hoga, right? So similarly, we have choice, free will, before we commit any act, not after that. Now, after hearing the theory of karma, the law of karma, and how it works, we are ready to answer this question. Why do bad things happen to good people? A simple example of granary. Granary means grain tank. You see there, those tanks are there where the grains are stored. It's called granary. So what happens is, when you want to store grains in that, the grains are put from the top. But if you want to remove it, you can't go to top all the time. So there is a small door below. And then you open that and you take out the grains. So suppose one year, the farmer had a very bad crop. But anyway, it was not good. So whatever he got, he has put it in the granary. And then he's eating it throughout the year. It is there going on, reducing. And the next year comes. And in the next year, he has a very good crop, very high quality grains. And obviously, he stores it also. But when he tries to take this out, he sees the crop is still, the grains are still bad. Still very low quality grains, like last year. So he gets surprised that I have put all good quality grain. Why am I getting this bad quality? Now tell me, why is he getting bad quality? Yes, the previous years is remaining, right? So first that will be over, then he will get the good ones also. So now, as this farmer in this year, he has put all good grains. Similarly, in our life, we have put in this life many good grains. We have not cheated anyone. We have not disturbed anyone. We didn't kill anyone. We didn't hurt anyone. कई बार लोग कहते हैं मैं चींटी को भी नहीं मारता हूँ, इतना बढ़िया आदमी हूँ. So, we haven't done anything, but still, many things are happening with us. So why? Because we are taking out the grains from below. It is the residual, or it is the previous karma which is remaining, and that you are getting the reaction. Once that is over, yes, whatever you are doing good, you will also receive it. So why do bad things happen to good people is because we have accumulated karmic reactions of many, many lifetime, and we are still getting the reaction of that. So it is not only this lifetime, last lifetime. So whatever bad things are happening, it's our last time's karma. We should accept it gracefully. We should accept it as Krishna's mercy. Like the example of Arthur Ashe. He was a famous Wimbledon player, and then he was diagnosed with cancer. He was about to die. So he was getting thousands of letters from his fans, thousands of letters. And he was reading, he was trying to reply because, his fans are writing. So in one of the letter it was written, said, why did God choose you for this? And he could have chosen many others. You are such a nice person, you are a Wimbledon player, why did God choose you? So he wrote a very nice answer to this question. His answer was, he said that in the whole world, 5 lakh people start playing professional tennis. Please hear carefully. Out of that, only 50,000 people all over the world are able to play in some tournaments, good tournaments. Out of them, very few come to professional tournaments. Out of them, very few come to Wimbledon. Out of them, only 4 come to semi-final. And out of them, only 2 people come to final. And then he writes, when I was holding the Wimbledon cup, I did not ask God, why me? And now also I don't have a right to ask God, why me? Such a beautiful answer. We also are in same way. When we get something good, we don't ask God, why me? You get some money. You earn some money. Suppose you get a lot of money. Maybe out of lottery, right? Somehow it comes. Or maybe one of your relatives died and he left for you. You don't ask God, why me? There are so many poor people. Why you didn't give it to them? I don't need it. That time we don't say, why me? But when we get trouble, when we get miseries, the first question is, why me? So understand that whatever happens in our life is due to our previous karma or Krishna's desire. And in both the cases, we have no choice but to accept it. After knowing this, what should we do? What is our next step that we should do? We should understand that human life is like a train junction. It is a junction. Junction, you know what are junctions? Junction is a place from where at least 2 ways are going, or many ways, but at least 2 ways. Train junction. Every station is not called junction. Junction is a place from where the train can go in this direction or the other direction. So human life is like a junction. We can, if you understand, if you remember, we had discussed about ability to inquire, and we have said if you inquire, then you can go on the higher or you can go to the animal kingdom. So please understand, life is a preparation for all of us, and death is an examination. We all have to face death, right? So prepare throughout your life for one examination called death. Because Krishna says, Antakale chamameva smaran muktava kalevaram, that at the end of your life, while leaving your body, if you remember me, then you will come to me. So we will pass our exam if we remember Krishna. Otherwise, we'll be here in this world, again in the chakra. So then, we have to understand that how to prepare. What is our preparation? So that means we have to learn the art of dying. Because that is very important. Krishna says that time is very important. If you leave your body, in what consciousness you are leaving your body, you decide about your next body. So that we have to prepare ourselves. So this is an examination. We have to prepare ourselves, and the preparation is to go back home, back to Godhead, spiritual world where Krishna resides. And the preparation starts with the real yoga. So now we will go for understanding this important topic of yoga. Today's topic, topmost yoga system. And then tomorrow we are going to take very practical topic, that all these what you have learned in these 6 days, how to apply it in life. Okay. So here we are talking about topmost yoga system. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita tells Arjuna, Tasmat yogi bhavarjuna. My dear Arjuna, you should become yogi. So he said, one must become a yogi. So now, who is a yogi? Right? As soon as we hear the word yogi, what comes to our mind? Somebody with his matted hair, with all those vibhuti, staying in Himalayas or something like that, right? That is what comes to our mind. So let us try to understand what is yoga, or who is a yogi. So before we go for that, we should also know what yoga is not, right? Of course, we have to know who is a yogi or what is a yoga. So what is yoga not meant for? The first thing, yoga is not meant for having a shapely body, right? I'm sorry to say this. All of you must be thinking, then what is the point of doing yoga, right? We do yoga only for this. So the body is not in shape, let the body come into shape. Yoga is not meant for that. I will tell you why, but please hear some reasons. Yoga is not for good health and increased sense gratification. I have heard that people advertise yoga for good sex. So it is not meant for that. Yoga is not meant for shapely body. Yoga is not meant for increased sense enjoyment. Yoga is also not meant for increased lifespan. That okay, I do yoga so I will not die even at the age of 100. People have to die. Even the person who was teaching yoga from Pune, he died around 93, 94 years old, but he has to die. Everyone has to die. So what is the point in having lifespan? Is that the purpose of yoga? And the purpose of yoga is also not just to get some mystic powers. You know, I remember many years back, maybe about 20 years back in our temple, I was saying, so one person came, he was a yoga teacher, very good yoga teacher. He told me many things about yoga, I liked it. So he told me, he said, Prabhuji, I can teach you a technique. Give me 15 days, 15 full days. I'll teach you a technique. You can, while sitting, you can rise yourself above the floor. You will not be sitting on the floor, you will be sitting in air. I can teach you in 15 days. Would you like to do that? I said, no. He said, why? I mean, anyone will be very happy, right? Suppose I'm sitting here now and then this is removed and I'm still sitting. He will say, wow, Babaji Bhagwan ho gaye. Something like that, right? So it's so nice. It'll be like a wonder. And if I can do it, suppose if I sit here and I can do it, all of you, Prabhuji, take as much money as you want. We also want to do it. So he told me, why? I said, then I will lose my focus on Krishna. Because then I would like to become famous. I'll go everywhere and sit in the air and people will, wow, and they'll come. They're just coming to see. Atul Krishna Prabhu in air, and then Atul Krishna Prabhu will remain in air only. That's all right. So, that is not meant for getting any mystic power. It is also, as soon as we hear yoga, we feel some person very thin. So, it is not for that renunciation also in meditation. So, what is yoga actually meant for? Now, please understand why I said all that. That it is not this, it is not just gymnastic exercise, it is not just for good health, etc. Because the word yoga comes from a root word called yuj. And the meaning of the word yuj is to link, to connect. And the real meaning of yoga is union. Union in love between individual and supreme consciousness. Or in simple word, where if you put it, living entity and God. So yoga means union of living entity and God. Linking with supreme is yoga, is the real purpose of yoga. If for that you have to do some exercises, that is fine. Then you can do it. But if the purpose is you are linking, otherwise it's not yoga. How will you call it yoga if you are not linking to the supreme? So, yoga means union in love between Jiva, living entity, and Param Jiva, or Atma, Param Atma. That is called yoga. And that we can perform when we understand the principles of Sanatan Dharma. Now, what is Sanatan Dharma? The word dharma means which cannot be given up, or that which is a constant companion. Let me give you some example. When we say water, what comes to our mind? Liquidity, right? If liquidity is not there, it is not considered as water. Simple. It changes the form. Or sugar, when we say, what comes to our mind? Sweetness, right? I come and give you something in your hand, take this as sugar, but this is not sweet. You'll say then I don't want it, right? Sugar means sweet. So the dharma of water is liquidity, which cannot be separated from water. Dharma of sugar is sweetness, which cannot be separated from sugar. Dharma of fire is heat and light. If you say there is fire, but there is no heat, there is no light. And what kind of fire is it? Fire means heat and light has to be there. So similarly, what is the dharma or characteristics of living being which cannot be separated from it? Give me some answers. I gave you example, sweetness and sugar. If you remove sweetness, you cannot call it sugar. So what is it that if removed from living entity, it will not be called living entity? I'm talking of soul. What is it that will be removed from soul? If what is dharma of soul? Let's talk about it. Dharma of sugar is sweetness. Dharma of water is liquid. What is dharma of soul? Service to God. Very nice. So to render service. If you remove service from soul, from living entity, you cannot call it living entity. No one can live without serving someone else. Everyone in this world is serving someone or other. Maybe in the family, the father is serving the children, or maybe in the nation, the politicians are serving the nation, maybe in the society, wherever you are, person keeps serving. And through that service, if that same service is connected to Supreme, that becomes yoga. And what are different types of yogas? We will see. There are different varieties or categories of human beings, basically broadly divided into two. One, law abiders, and one, law breakers. Law abiders means those who follow scriptures, laws. And law breakers means those who do not follow scriptures. And in those who are following scriptures, there are 4 categories: Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. This is what is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Different kinds of yoga. So there is Karma Yoga. You must have heard this word. People say we should be Karma Yogi. Means keep working. There is Jnana Yoga. People say we should be Jnana Yogi. Keep taking knowledge. Then there is Ashtanga Yoga, which generally is taught to you in the form of asanas. And then there is Bhakti Yoga. Let's just try to compare these things to come to a point that which is the topmost yoga. Now, Ashtanga Yoga. We have seen generally Karma Yoga means people get connected, people do some karma. Gyan means knowledge. What is Ashtanga Yoga? Ashtanga Yoga is a meditative process to control the mind and senses and ultimately focus one's concentration on the Supreme. So in Ashtanga Yoga, there are 8 steps, out of which only one is taught to you, asanas. Right? That is why I said yoga doesn't mean just doing some exercises. That is just one part of it. What it requires is to have yam, niyam. Yam, niyam means certain things to do, certain things not to do. What you can do, what you cannot do. This is, then you go to asanas. Not that directly day one you go to yoga teacher and they start teaching you how, who. It doesn't work like that. You may not get good benefit. That is not real yoga. So real 8 steps of Ashtanga Yoga also, even if you go for Ashtanga Yoga, forget about Bhakti Yoga. You need to follow yam, niyam. And then comes asanas. Then you, whatever you're taught, different kinds of asanas. And after that, there is pranayam. There is pratyahar. Pratyahar means you have to give up the food of the senses. Then there is dharana. Then there is dhyan, meditation. And then there is samadhi. So it is not just doing some exercises. Yoga means, Ashtanga Yoga also means these 8 steps. And in general, somebody who perfects that Ashtanga Yoga, he may get some of these siddhis, mystic powers. Why am I saying this? That if you see this mystic's power, don't consider that person to be God. But if you read this, what are these mystic powers? You will be amazed. The first one is anima, becoming very small. Hanumanji, when he went to Lanka, and then he reached Lanka, he made himself very small to enter Lanka, because he had all these mystic powers. So anima means becoming very small, like a person can become very small. Then there is laghima. You can become lighter than a feather, very light. Then there is prapti. You can get anything from anywhere. I am sitting here and I extend my hand and go to Kabul and get what do you get in Kabul? Very nice things. Apples? Huh? Anar. Okay. Pomegranate. We get anar from Kabul, right? I can do that sitting here. Or I can extend my hand to Shimla and get some nice apples from there. So this is, and what will you think if I do that? Bhagwan. Isn't it? You tell me seriously, isn't it? If I sit here and I say, yes, what do you want? And she'll say, can you bring snow from Kashmir? I said, yes. Here is it. I said, wow, wonder. Can you get me an earring? Yes. Gold. Huh? And then he said, it's Bhagavan. These are all material things. Please understand. These siddhis, these mystics powers do not make you God. You can do this. You can become very small. You can become very light. You can produce what you want. Maybe gold, maybe some other things. But that doesn't make you God. So prapti means to get anything. Mahima means become heavier than the heaviest. You become very heavy. Ishitva, to create or annihilate something wonderful. Prakamya, never be frustrated in any desire. That means your desires will be fulfilled. Vashitva, to control all material elements. And Kamavasaita, assume any shape or form. Now these all things we read in scriptures. right? People could assume different forms, people could get some things from somewhere, and they could create something. These are all given in the Shastras. Like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is given that one Rishi, he created an aeroplane which had thousands of rooms, which had lakes. It was a plane, but it had everything. And then in that he enjoyed with his wife for many, many years. So these are all just siddhis. They don't make you God. Now, have you seen Krishna doing any of this? Have you heard? Suddenly Krishna became very small. Suddenly Krishna became very heavy. Yes, he did sometime. Krishna could when required. But he didn't require to show all this just to become God. So those who have these siddhis, they display them to get some recognition. Krishna doesn't need recognition, right? He is God and not chosen by anyone. He is always God. Krishna is the only one who doesn't want to be God, who wants to just play around. All others want to be God, right? So these are some of the siddhis you get. And when you talk of karma yogi, what are the qualities of a karma yogi? I'm just explaining you so that you understand the importance of bhakti yoga. They offer fruits of labor to God. So karma yogi doesn't mean who keep working. People say we are karma yogi in Mumbai, we don't have time, right? We just keep working, morning to evening. If you want to come to temple, no time. 2 hours, 4 hours goes only in traffic, isn't it? And that's why we are karma yogis. No, karma yogi is someone who offers his fruits of labor to God. He must work in spiritual consciousness. That is when he will become yogi. He should be detached from fruits of labor, give up sense of proprietorship, and work without laziness. This is all from Bhagavad Gita. That is a karma yogi. And jnana yogi, he tries to understand the absolute truth through philosophical knowledge. An Ashtanga yogi or Ashtanga yoga, we just mentioned Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga. Any of you remember what were the 8 stages? Ashtanga? Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dhyan, Dharana, Samadhi. Wow, wonderful. That's 8, right? So this Ashtanga yoga is not practical for Kali Yuga, right? Very difficult to perform. And it's not practical because there are a lot of stages. It's not just asanas, the Dhyan, Dharana, and then you have to meditate. It's very difficult. So what is practical is Bhakti Yoga. Yoga of selfless, ecstatic love of God by rendering devotional service. This is Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna instructs Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita that Bhakti Yoga is the highest and topmost yoga system. It involves 3 things: Bhakti, Bhagavan, and the Bhakt. The devotee, the worshipable Lord, and the process to reach that. And it is practiced in 9 ways. Now these 9 ways are given in Srimad Bhagavatam, that bhakti is practiced in 9 ways. These are the 9 ways by which bhakti is practiced. The topmost yoga system is practiced by these 9 ways. The first one is Shravanam, hearing. Shravanam means hearing. The second is Kirtanam, means singing the glories or chanting or speaking about God. Kirtanam. And then Smaranam, remembering. Now you tell me, in our day-to-day life, what Shravan we do? What do we hear? About politics, about movies, about sports, corruption, criticizing others, right? And what kirtan we do? Of the same things, what we hear. And obviously what will be our smaran? What will we remember? When we are going to sleep, we are remembering only that, right? That is why Shravan, Kirtanam, Smaranam of Krishna, not your. And then Archanam. Archanam means worshipping. Vandanam means offering prayers. Padasevanam means serving the Lord's feet. And then Dasyam, carrying out orders as servant. Sakhyam, being friend with the Lord. And Atmanivedanam, surrendering everything to God. These are 9 ways by which we can perform bhakti. It is very joyfully performed, ecstatically performed, and it gives happiness instantly. Susukham kartum avyayam. Krishna says that when you perform this, you just get happiness. So Bhakti Yoga is the topmost yoga system. Now, what are the qualities of this? The easiest means to revive our dormant inherent constitutional position, self-realization. This is the easiest means. Servitor, served, and service, I spoke about it. Bhakti, Bhagwan, and Bhakta. 9 processes of devotional service, culmination of all yogas, attained through 2 ways, gradual and direct. You can gradually do bhakti or you can directly do bhakti. We will speak about it in some time. So how bhakti yoga is topmost? Number 1, we get maximum result by performing bhakti yoga. Number 2, in minimum time. Number 3, minimum effort. It is like just taking the escalator. Minimum effort. You don't have to walk, you don't have to climb up. Just stand, you'll go. And then no previous qualification. Very important. Bhakti doesn't require any previous qualification. You must be this, you must be that. You must be a graduate, you must be an engineer, you must be doing this, or you must perform this. Nothing. No previous. And it can be practiced at all times. Any time. It's complete. It gives complete security. You don't have to be fearful. Bhakti gives us complete security and it frees us completely from sins. Very important thing. No other process completely frees us from sin. Even if some sins go away, the seeds remain and the desire to commit that sin remains. But by bhakti, you remove everything. Even the desire to commit sin go away. So you'll never commit the sin again. So it completely frees us from sins. And bhakti is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The whole Bhagavad Gita is spoken for us to understand the process of bhakti and follow. And that is why the final instruction of Krishna to Arjuna was Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchah. That he says, give up everything, whatever you have, give all varieties of dharma, what you call dharma, and take up the real dharma. And what is that? Surrender unto me. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. And then he says, aham tvam sarva papebhyo. If you are feeling that if I give up that thing, I'll be getting sinful reaction, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami. I will deliver you, don't worry. Have faith and surrender unto me. This is Krishna's instruction in Bhagavad Gita. And the same instructions were preached by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his pastime 500 years ago when he appeared. He is the same Krishna, but he appeared to instruct the message of Bhagavad Gita through his own life. So he exemplified the message of Bhagavad Gita to teach us how to perform bhakti. And this is what Mahaprabhu preached. So now I was telling you that bhakti is very easy and topmost. How do we understand this? So let's see, we see a ladder of spiritual development. On the lowest level, we see that there are people who are just involved in performing some rituals just to get some material benefit, karma kandis. You get so many of them. If you do this, you get this. If you perform this yajna, you get this. If you perform this, if you fast on this, you get this. And what you get it? Material benefit. You may get some money, you may get some power, you may get some fame in this world. So that is on the lowest level. The second level comes is of karma yogi, who renounces fruits of one's labor. He is not attached. Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. He is not attached to the fruits. And then the third step is of the Jnana Yogi, then Ashtanga Yogi, and then Bhakti Yogi. Now there are two ways I showed you, gradual and direct. So gradual is that you take one step and reach up to the top place. And the direct is, and the direct is like elevator. You can directly perform bhakti. You need not go through karma kand, karma yoga, jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga and then come to bhakti. That is also one way. But there is another way, direct. You can directly perform bhakti. It is said that you may be any person, most sinful personality also in the world. Bhagavatam says, Kirathunandra pulinda pulkasha abhir shumbha yavana kasadaya ye anye cha papa yadapashraya shraya Shuddhanti tasmai prabhaveshnave namaha. It says that people may be of any category of sinful people. Kirat, Hunandra, Pulinda, Pulakasha, Abhir, Shumbha, Yavan, Khasadaya, Ityadi, etc. everyone. And Annecha Papa, there may be people who are more sinful than these. They also are delivered. Shuddhanti tasmai prabhavishnave namaha. If you worship the God in loving devotional service. So Bhakti Yoga is the topmost yoga system, can be performed very easily, can be directly performed, no qualification is required, and it pleases Krishna the most. And how to perform this Bhakti we are going to see tomorrow in the practical application of Bhagavad Gita. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
For more such devotional programs, please watch Hare Krishna television. To get this channel, please contact your cable or DTH operator. For more information, please call 8767 845 845.